On today's edition of Cronkite Sports Live, plenty of questions surrounding ASU football after last week's brutal loss, and this week they're faced with perhaps the toughest opponent they'll face all year.
ASU Volleyball is finally back home with no signs of slowing down. An action-packed match at Mullet Arena last night against their arch rivals.
And finally, the Arizona State swim and dive season starts today. We've got live coverage from Mona Plummer Aquatic Center as the Sun Devils welcome Georgia to Tempe. All this and so much more on Cronkite Sports Live.
Everyone, welcome inside Studio 6 for another edition of Cronkite Sports Live. Cavan Malaytern and Ben Parris with you here from downtown Phoenix. And Ben, a big week for Arizona State University, not only just in the playing surfaces with the athletic department, but also in the classroom.
Cavan, if you haven't heard, it's 9 years in a row, Arizona State University, #1 in innovation, but I don't think playing 4 quarterbacks in your first 3 weeks is too innovative at all.
No, that might be the one category where they're behind MIT and Stanford, for a matter of fact.
I think we got to break down the 29-0 loss against Fresno State. It was absolutely brutal. So how about we do some Nugget Minute?
Let's do it.
Let's toss 60 seconds up on the clock, and away we go. 1, it's been 100 minutes and 7 seconds since ASU scored a point in a football game. 2, 8 turnovers in a game are the most the Sun Devils have had since 1973 when they had 10 against Utah. 3, Arizona State ranks 129th of the 133 FBS teams in total offense. 4, the 29-0 loss to Fresno State marked the first time ASU was shut out anywhere since 2008 and the last time they were shut out at home since 1988. Both those losses came to USC. They play the Trojans this week. 5, and this is some better news, the Sun Devils' 29 points allowed last week were the fewest by a team with 8 or more turnovers in at least the last 10 years. 6, this is the first time ASU has started 1-2 in consecutive seasons since 1998 and 1999. And 7, Arizona State is tied for 100th in the nation in third down conversions and 110th in fourth down conversions. You want some sauce with that, Cavan?
Let me get some ketchup and ranch with that. Well, now I'm hungry, Ben, overall, so thanks for that. We'll stay with ASU football, and besides the turnovers and the lack of offense, the injuries to the roster have stacked up, even to a point where after last Saturday's game, head coach Kenny Dillingham couldn't keep track of them. To update those who are hungry for updates about those injured players, here's WCSN football reporter Sean Brennan.
The pressure is rising in Tempe, as the beginning of the 2023 campaign has been anything but smooth sailing for Arizona State football. Despite suffering a second straight loss last Saturday, the big story has been the staggering number of injuries head coach Kenny Dillingham's crew has faced just 3 weeks into the season. And with this weekend's Pac-12 opener against 5th-ranked USC on the horizon, let's take a deeper dive into the state of ASU's roster. Starting just under the surface, key players on both sides of the ball left prematurely against Fresno State last weekend, most notably edge rusher Clayton Smith and slot receiver Melquan Stovall. But both Smith and Stovall practiced this week, so we could see them back in the lineup come Saturday. Sitting a bit deeper are ASU's quarterbacks. Week 1 starter Jaden Rashada is sidelined for at least 4 weeks, and Trenton Bourget is also doubtful to play on Saturday. Next on the depth chart is Drew Pine, who re-aggravated a hamstring injury against the Bulldogs. However, Pine has practiced this week, meaning he'll likely start against USC. We've now reached the abyssal zone, as ASU's depth up front is razor thin. Isaiah Glass, Emmett Boley, and Maxi Hanachor are just 3 of the several offensive linemen currently battling ailments. But the Sun Devils are expected to get some players back for this week. Jalen Conyers was inactive last week with an undisclosed injury, but the star tight end will be back in action for ASU this weekend. On the defensive line, Anthony Cooper began practicing for the first time in the regular season this week, joining an already talented group. So even with depleted depth in some areas, Captain Dillingham's group will look to right the ship against the top 5 foe this weekend.
All right, thanks so much for that, Sean. So ASU's missing a lot of key pieces, but the one that's always going to stick out to fans is the quarterback position. Following a week in which 3 different quarterbacks played against Fresno State, we welcome in WCSN football reporter Tia Reed to dive deeper at what's going on under center. And so, Tia, it was announced earlier today, Drew Pine gets the nod against USC tomorrow night. He took the first team reps this week in practice after leaving last week's game due to injury, in which his debut didn't really go to plan. What does him starting mean for this ASU offense this weekend?
Yeah, believe it or not, despite his performance last weekend, this really is a best-case scenario for ASU. The stat line, not very impressive, only 52 yards and 4 turnovers. But Pine has the experience starting for a team like Notre Dame. He was 8-2 as a starter, and more importantly, he has experience playing against top 25 teams and winning. So ASU, in the situation that they're in, they want someone experienced who can manage the game and even control it a little bit, and that is Drew Pine. Now, the one thing that kind of knocks against him is the injury. We know he had that hamstring injury coming into the season and another injury on that same leg that took him out of last week's game. So will that factor into his performance? We have yet to see.
Yeah, and maybe that injury is part of the reason why he struggled last week. But behind Pine on the depth chart is BYU transfer Jacob Conover, who actually had to get called into duty last week. There is a chance that we could see him again. If so, what does he bring to the table?
Yeah, it's really not a high chance that we see Conover. I mean, Conover only came into last weekend's game because Bourget and Pine were injured. But with that being said, Conover didn't play the worst, all things considered. I mean, that Fresno State game was a mess offensively for ASU, but even then, Conover had 89 passing yards. He did have the 2 interceptions, but there were a couple of nice throws that he made, including a 27-yarder to Kyson Brown and a 31-yard pass to Melquan Stovall. So he showed off some flashes of why he was brought into ASU and what he could provide at the quarterback position as far as depth goes.
All right, Tia, so my last question goes beyond the quarterback situation. Let's just dive into this team as well. These past few weeks for Arizona State football has just been brutal. Lackluster play, the injuries, just so much going wrong. What's the best case scenario for this team moving forward?
I mean, the outlook is not great. You go beyond number 5 USC this weekend, and you have a Colorado team that's ranked, Washington and Washington State, Utah, UCLA, all these teams that they have to play, Oregon as well, that are ranked teams. So that leaves really just Cal and Arizona as where ASU might be able to pick up a win. Now, Cal is next weekend after USC, but it's going to be ASU's first game on the road. They likely will still have some injury struggles, and the question is, can they make that turnaround that quickly? Now, you go back to last season after what happened with Herm Edwards, and people didn't think that ASU would be able to win a conference game in that situation either, and yet you go to that Washington game and ASU knocked off Washington at home with Trenton Bourguet in as the backup. Does this year's ASU team have the potential to have an upset like that? Possibly, but will it happen this weekend against USC? Not very likely.
All right, Tia. Thank you so much for taking your time to join us today. Arizona State hopes to get back to 500 with what would be a miraculous win tomorrow night, but even then, it's still not going to be easy.
So at this point in the college football season, it seems pretty unlikely that the Arizona State Sun Devils will be able to steal a win or two in the Pac-12 conference and generate some of that growth, as Tia just mentioned, as conference play gets started this week and the Sun Devils welcome number 5 USC to Tempe. So to help us preview the Trojans and the Heisman winner Caleb Williams, here's WCSN's Aiden Blank.
The Sun Devils have their work cut out for them, facing their first-ranked opponent in their Pac-12 opener. The USC offense is led by superstar Caleb Williams, a Heisman Trophy winner who put up a strong showing last year against ASU. QB1 finished 27 of 37, throwing for 3 touchdowns and an interception. His 2023 campaign has all the makings of another record-breaking year. The junior already has tallied 12 touchdown passes, 3 of which came in the 56-10 beatdown of Stanford, the most points USC has scored in the history of the series. It's a homecoming week for freshman Deuce Robinson, a former Pinnacle High standout in Arizona that's already made an impact offensively in SoCal. He's accounted for nearly 150 receiving yards over 8 targets in USC's first 3 contests. Robinson was the top-ranked tight end in the country and a 2-sport athlete who plans to be shagging fly balls in the spring with USC baseball. And let's not overlook the defense. The men of Troy held ASU to just 8 second-half points last October, and they've only gotten better since. Linebacker Eric Gentry is a former Sun Devil, transferring to Tempe after earning freshman All-America honors. Gentry stood out in his inaugural season with the Trojans, playing in 11 of 14 games, finishing third on the team with 71 tackles, 6 of which came against his former program. The Trojans sported 12-7 series lead when games were played in Tempe and look to make it 7 wins in their last 9 games against ASU before riding off next season to join the Big Ten.
Thank you so much, Aiden. As mentioned, USC rides into Tempe as the 5th-ranked team in the country. The last time the Sun Devils welcomed in a top 5 team to the Valley, ASU gifted the Washington Huskies with a Trojan horse of their own. For more on that, here's Blake Neiman with today's edition of The Vault.
Perfect 83-degree night in October 2017. Arizona State welcomed its first top 5 opponent in half a decade, the number 5 ranked Washington Huskies. Fresh off a college football playoff berth, the Dogs tripped down to Tempe with a 6-0 record. The Sun Devils, meanwhile, were still trying to recover from a 1-2 start and lost to a team from the Mountain West Conference. Sound familiar? On the Devils' opening drive, ASU charged down into Washington territory, but suddenly got halted with a 4th-and-1 scenario. Instead of settling for a field goal, Todd Graham followed the same logic as Kenny Dillingham, deciding the risk was worth the reward. The Sun Devils' gamble paid off as Manny Wilkins darted up N'Keal Harry to set up a Caleb Milage score and get ASU on the board first. True freshman kicker Brandon Ruiz would chip in half a dozen more, giving the Sun Devils a 13-0 lead heading into the locker room. Yet just like these past 2 weeks, ASU got shut out in the second half. It didn't matter as the Sun Devil defense dominated the Dogs, dropping reigning Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year Jake Browning 5 times. For context, Browning had been sacked only 5 times all season up to that point. Heisman Trophy winner Caleb Williams has been sacked just 3. ASU's defense held the conference's highest scoring offense scoreless through 3 quarters and limited Washington to a measly 230 total yards. The Sun Devils outlasted the Perfect Purple 13-7 for their first win over a top 5 opponent since they shut out number 1 Nebraska in 1996.
We shift our focus now to Arizona State volleyball. The Sun Devils are finally back home, and how about we head inside the Mullet? An undefeated Arizona State Sun Devil team kicking off Pac-12 play with a rivalry game against the Wildcats of Arizona. ASU hasn't beaten U of A at home since March of 2021. They look to use the support of a packed Mullet Arena to their advantage. We start with the first point of the game, and of course it's star opposite hitter Marta Levinska getting things rolling for ASU. The first set was close, but it came down to Arizona's Jordan Wilson slightly hitting it out of bounds. ASU took the first one 25-22. Second set now, and look out for Claire Jeter. That was a rocket right over the top to even things out early in the second. Knotted up at 10 apiece here in the second set once again. And Shannon Shields, big out of the system set back to Jelly Sear. She hammers one cross court, and that gives Arizona State the lead. Meanwhile, Levinska still in the second set, cleanup set 2 with a kill through the gap. The Sun Devils now have an opportunity with a strong third set to complete their 7th sweep of the season, and they are able to. It was all ASU right there. Nasty float from Shields on the right side. 36 assists on the night to go along with that ace you just saw. And finally, to wrap up a victory, who else would it be but Marta Levinska? It's a clean sweep for ASU. They improved to 13-0, the 3rd best start in program history. Here's head coach, the first year, J.J. Van Niel, as his team is absolutely dialed after his first home victory.
I'm sure there were some nerves. I think that's why it took a little while to get our serving going. But they settled in, and at the end of the day, once you start playing volleyball, you're just playing some volleyball. So I was fired up. I really appreciate all the fans that came out, and they were into it. It was really fun.
A sold-out crowd plus a student section of 1,265 helped create one of the most memorable atmospheres ASU volleyball has ever seen as they played their first ever game in Mullet Arena and took down their rivals from down south. We now welcome in WCSN volleyball reporter Tyler Weiss to help us break down the action. And Tyler, through 13 games, ASU remains undefeated. Last night's sweep marks 7 in a row, which is tied for the longest streak in school history. What are your thoughts on how the team has performed so far?
Well, Ben, it's certainly been an impressive season for the Sun Devils. Their 13-0 start is the third best in school history, and it's shaping up to be a really special season. It seems like every week history is being made under first-year head coach J.J. Van Niel, and not just team history. Last night, Mullet Arena was completely sold out with an attendance of 4,816 people. This was the third highest crowd in school history and the first time the crowd surpassed 4,000 people since 2015. 2015 was the last time the Sun Devils made the tournament, and the fans are excited about that, as they should be.
And when a team is playing this well, it's very easy to draw the conclusion, hey, there might be some stars on this roster. Is there anyone whose performance stood out to you in last night's match that you'd like to highlight?
I remain impressed by senior opposite hitter Marta Levinska's dominance for the Sun Devils. Last night, she led the team with 19 kills, which now puts her at 13th most kills in school history with 1,190. I'd also like to highlight graduate setter Shannon Shields, who set a season high in kills with 5 last night. Shields has taken her game to another level this season, having 34 kills so far after having 24 all of last season. Speaking of season highs, junior outside hitter Jelly Sear set a remarkable season high 12 digs, which led the team.
All right, last question for you is about the team's next match on Sunday against Washington. Both the Sun Devils and the Huskies had a game last night against their rivals. However, in a notable contrast, Washington was on the receiving end of a sweep while ASU got the job done. So could that be a promising sign for the Sun Devils?
An important thing to note here is Washington's offensive struggles. The team's hitting percentage currently stands at 226, which is currently the second lowest in the Pac-12, only above Utah. These struggles seemingly got worse last night, as the Huskies had a hitting percentage of just 170. This could be a great sign for ASU's defense that has only allowed a hitting percentage of 135, which is the best in the Pac-12. ASU's offensive performance perfectly complements the defense with a hitting percentage of 347, the highest in the Pac-12 and the nation. Looking at it from this angle, the odds may very well be in ASU's favor, but it should still be a very interesting match, seeing as Washington is sitting at a 9-3 record.
Tyler, thank you very much for all of that. And as ASU Volleyball tries to march towards the tournament for the first time in 8 years, they'll have to battle some of the toughest opponents in the country during conference play. For an outlook on the final season of Pac-12 volleyball, here's WCSN Volleyball Insider Sammy Miller.
For the final time, the Pac-12 volleyball season is now underway. The Pac has always been one of the most dominant conferences in the entire country. 17 national championships, the most of any conference, with a Pac-12 school winning the title for 5 straight seasons starting in 2001. Needless to say, this powerhouse conference will now be elevating their new respective destinations next season. But for now, let's break down these Pac-12 teams. In this week's top 25, there are 3 Pac-12 schools in the top 10. Now, no surprise that last season's Pac-12 champions, the Stanford Cardinal, is coming in at 4th, with the reigning Pac-12 setter of the year, Cami Minor, setting absolute butter. Then Oregon at 6, led by none other than Mimi Collier, the AVCA National Freshman of the Year, as well as Pac-12 Freshman of the Year. And right on the Ducks' tails are the Washington State Cougars at 7th. ASU fans may recognize their current kill leader with 148 already. It's former Sun Devil Iman Isanovich, who continues to show how she is one of the best attackers in the entire country. Last season, the Sun Devils were far from the top 25, but this season is a different story. They are currently receiving the most amount of votes outside the top 25 with 52 due to their 13-0 start to the year. USC, UCLA, and Washington are all receiving votes as well. Now, only time will tell to see how not only the Sun Devils manage Pac-12 play, but also to see if a Pac-12 team could claim one last championship title before the conference diminishes.
Thanks so much, Sammy. Just down the road from Mullet, ASU women's soccer begins its final season of Pac-12 play tonight as they welcome in the Oregon State Beavers. Our reporters of Justin Lastratosa and Ryan Myers went out to Sun Devil Soccer Stadium to break down the latest on ASU soccer.
We are here at Sun Devil Soccer Stadium, reporting from Tempe, Justin Lacertosa, Ryan Myers. Ryan, Sun Devil women's soccer 5-1-3 in their non-conference slate, and they really found an identity for themselves on the defensive side of the field, only giving up 3 goals through their first 9 matches, the least in the Pac-12.
Yeah, Justin, that defense has been absolutely amazing for Arizona State, but can you tell me why the Sun Devil defense has been so good?
Well, let's just take a glance at the numbers. Arizona State ranks in at 1st in the Pac-12 and 7th in the country in goals against average in .33. They've recorded 6 clean sheets this season, the most in a single season in Graham Winkworth's 7-year tenure as head coach. Sophomore goalkeeper Pauline Nels has had a stellar start to her season as well, as she ranks in at 1st in the Pac-12 in save percentage. However, a lot of the credit should be going to that midfield and that back line for really just making it a grind for the opposition to get upfield and push the attack.
Yeah, Justin, you mentioned the Pac-12, and Arizona State has their first Pac-12 matchup of the year on Friday against Oregon State when they host the Beavers. The Beavers are currently 3-2-3 thus far on the year, and they've only scored 8 goals in their first 8 matches, being led by junior McKenna Martinez, who has 3 goals for herself this season. Expect that ASU back line to be impressive again on Friday.
Yeah, and this match against the Beavers will be Arizona State's final Pac-12 opener, as they'll be making their move to the Big 12 Conference next season. Ryan, Coach Winkworth himself said that there are 2 to 3 teams in this year's Pac-12 that feel special. So just walk me through those marquee matchups that await the Sun Devils as their final season of Pac-12 play begins.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Pac-12 Conference. The conference is absolutely loaded once again this year. ASU takes on number 4 Stanford next Thursday up in Northern California, a team that's already beaten the likes of Duke and number 13 Santa Clara. Looking past that, though, later down the line, they play teams like number 17 UCLA and number 22 Southern California. Expect a tough schedule for ASU in conference play once again this year, but it all starts on Friday versus Oregon State.
The Sun Devils will take the field at 7 p.m., where they will look to swing some momentum in their favor as their final season of Pac-12 play begins. This has been Justin Lacertosa and Ryan Myers. We'll send it back to you guys in Studio 6.
All right, guys, thanks so much. Tonight's conference opener for ASU kicks off at 7 p.m. Be sure to stay up to date with all of our coverage on CronkiteSports.com.
Just 2 events into their season, ASU men's golf has already made plenty of headlines and are sweeping up victories left and right. All-American Preston Summerhays won the Sahali Players Championship just after he returned, representing Team USA at the Walker Cup, earning him a spot in the Fortinet Championship on the PGA Tour, where he made his first career cut in just his 6th tour start and led the field in driving distance. Meanwhile, freshman FIFA Leapakdi won his collegiate debut at the Maui Gym individual, shooting a 3-day total of 15 under par, while back at home, 5th-year senior Game Salvanera captured his first victory at the Papaco individual behind rounds of 64, 66, and 71. That makes it 3 individual wins so far this season for a team that has much more improved depth over the squad that made it to the quarterfinals at last year's national championship.
Swim and dive has officially returned to the Valley of the Sun as Arizona State welcomes in the University of Georgia this weekend. The Sun Devils are coming off one of their best seasons in program history last year as the national runner-ups. Lots to follow this season with the team, so we've got our own Issa Romero out at Mona Plummer Aquatic Center to help fill us in on how the first day went, as it looks like it just wrapped up. Issa, what are some of your biggest takeaways from day one?
Well, some of my biggest takeaways, Cavan, is on the men's side of the pool, pure dominance from medleys to relays to freestyles. They really did it all today, securing the day win at 89-45. And Leon Marchand really led the way for them in their relays and in his solo events. He secured 3 wins today. But on the women's side of the pool, they struggled a little bit more. They're losing the day 87-45, and they'll be looking to make some more improvements tomorrow. Gavin, back to you.
All righty, Eastside, thank you so much. You can catch all the updates from not just today's competition, but tomorrow as well with a 9 a.m. start on CronkiteSports.com. The duo to watch this season for Arizona State on the men's side is Leon Marchand and Jack Dolan, as both swimmers headline the lineup as some of the most talented athletes in the country. Our Justin Carter tells you everything you need to know about the 2 Sun Devils.
Sun Devil Swim is back in Tempe, and it's looking like a fun season ahead for Arizona State with the return of the dominating duo of French phenom Leon Marchand and sprinter Jack Dolan. For those unfamiliar with Marchand's game, it's time to pay attention because he's shattering records left and right. Going back in time to last season at the NCAA Championships, he broke the NCAA record for the 200 individual medley with a time of 1:36.34, a record previously held by himself. He would also break his own 400 IM record with a time of 3:28.82, leading the Sun Devils to play second just behind Cal. The hunt for an NCAA title is certainly a big reason why Marchand's back for another year with the Devils. He wasn't done there though. Remember Michael Phelps, the most decorated Olympian ever? Marchand took his last individual world record over the summer in Japan in the 400 individual medley with a 4:02.50 win, all while the legend Phelps was there to watch. Now Marchand may be ASU's Batman, but what is Batman without his Robin, and what would Sun Devil Swim be without Jack Dolan? Dolan's a graduate student specializing in backstroke and freestyle who impressed at NCAA champs where he placed top 10 in 6 events, 7th place in the 50 free. Dolan's summer may have been quieter, but take a look back to last season's Pac-12 championship where Dolan became a champion in the 50 free with a time of 18.86 in a thrilling race. It'll be tough for Marchand and Dolan to have better seasons than their 2022-23 campaigns, but the Sun Devils are hungry to avenge last season's 52-point scoring difference behind NCAA champs Cal. Arizona State competes in its first pair of meets this weekend against the Georgia Bulldogs, just like they did to open up last season, and boy, was it a season.
To Justin, and now we move on to top plays. Number 3, we'll start with volleyball at Mullet Arena. This is in the second set right here. A interestingly paced rally here with the score being 6-5 in favor of Arizona. But watch this swing right here by Claire Jeter right at the net, knotted things up at 6 aside.
The ASU offense has had their fair share of struggles, but the defense actually not playing too bad. That's the safety, Shamari Simmons. Hanging out on your screen right now. He's going to leave the frame for just a moment. Take a look. Ball snap. Here comes Simmons straight through the offensive line and is able to record the sack. That's 1 out of 3 sacks ASU had against Fresno State. They still lost 29-0.
And finally, we go to number 1. We will conclude with volleyball. Second set, 10-10 score. And we got a really long rally for you, but that was the highlight right there. Mary Scholl, that one-handed dive to keep the rally going. Arizona State would eventually win this point right here, take the advantage, and use that home crowd to their advantage and get that momentum right back on their side. It's a big night for Arizona State women's volleyball, and the 21st of September will be a night they'll remember for quite some time. So that's going to do it for us here on Cronkite Sports Live. For all the phenomenal people who work this show behind the scenes, for Ben Parris, I'm Cavan Malaytern. We'll see you next week on Cronkite Sports Live.